And I will, there we go. And I'm going to highlight me to start with, if I can find it here. There we go.
Interesting, Mike.
So you can see me, and so I can see me. So let's just double check here. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so today's fly is this guy here, and it's called Pearl Cathy's Coat. Now the pearl, I'm sure, is for the flash, and I wonder if it was something different. Cathy's Coat was something different before they added the pearl. Anyway, the materials to start with is the hook is a Mustad O'Shaughnessy. For me, it is anyway. This guy here, which you'll see is backwards. It's a 2X heavy, 1X long saltwater hook. And the thread is pink, and this is 210 Dernier thread, so it's fairly thick. It's not a floss. And also black thread for the head, which we'll get to later. The body of the fly is, in the first instance, is thread, and the thread will get covered. Thread body will get covered with. This pattern was for pink scud back, but I don't have pink, and I couldn't find any at Robinson, so I'm going to use clear. It just gives it a shine. Or in alternative, this is edge bright or laser wrap, and I've cut this fairly thin. It's a little less than 1/8 of an inch wide. So this version that's sitting here now is the laser wrap version, but we'll do both. It's fairly quick to tie. The flash on the tail is typically the original calls for pearl crystal flash, which is this stuff here. But when I was scrounging through, I found at Robinson's this stuff, which is UV crystal flash, ultraviolet. And I really like the way that stuff looks. So I'm going to tie it with that stuff. The wing is polar bear. So I have some small piece patches of polar bear, and it doesn't need to be really long. It only needs to be from the eye of the hook back to about 1 gap length behind the tail. So you can use some of your shorter polar bear for that. So what we'll do is we'll start with the one that uses thread for a body. I'm just gonna do what all good tires should do, is debarb your hook at the start. And I've always been a catch and release fisherman, and by that I mean if you catch a fisherman, you get to release him. So I'm going to start the thread directly behind the eye, and I'm going to wrap down the shank until I get a little less than 1/3 of the way down the shank, and trim off the excess of the thread. What I want to do here is to have a relatively smooth body of thread. So I nip the corner of my tinsel package, and I'm going to take out probably about 4 strands of flashaloo, or crystal flash, I should say. And I'm just going to ease them out of there. And I'm going to cut them off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this crystal flash and fold it in half. And I'm going to put it on the hook so that the loop at the end here extends about a gap length behind the bend of the hook. And I'm going to tie it in at the front. And then I'm going to hold this stuff up at an angle and wrap this thread over it all the way down to the bend of the hook. And I'm going to take this actually a little bit past where you would normally stop, which is at the point where the barb of the hook used to be. And I'm just going to go a little bit past that to where the bend starts. And then I'm going to wrap around behind it a good 2 wraps to make that to make that crystal flash stand up a little bit. And then wrap in front. At that point, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim off just basically a gap length behind the hook. And you'll see that little wrap in behind has made the crystal flash stand up in the air a bit. I'm going to come up front and I'm going to trim off the rest of this crystal flash at the front. I'm going to try and save a couple of pieces of that. Then I'm going to get my little clear scud back. And I don't need much of it, probably about 1.5 inches or so. I'll cut that. Then I'm going to take the scud back and tie it in right at the back here where that bit of crystal flash tail is. Kind of spin the thread so it falls the right way. Tie it in by the tip. Tie it down really good. And now I'm going to do the tail with closely touching, do the body with closely touching wraps of thread up the hook shank. And this one, I don't mind crowding the eye a little bit. So I'm going to bring the thread up to about 2 eye widths behind the eye of the hook. And then I'm going to go back over it with the thread all the way back to the back. And what I'm trying to do here is make a nice smooth body. There's a little bit of a bump where I tied the plastic wrap in. So I'm just gonna, that's still not quite right. Oh, that's gonna stay there. I'm gonna wrap that forward again. So I got the thread makes a little bit of bulk to the body, but it's nice and smooth. Again, I'm gonna stop the thread about 2 eye widths behind the front, the eye. Now I'm gonna take this stretch wrap, scud back, and I'm going to wrap it up the hook just with a slight overlap. Take that right up to where the thread is. And then I'm going to wrap over top of it 2 or 3 times. And then wrap underneath a couple times. And I pull up on it, stretch it a bit, and then cut it free. And then I'm going to wrap over the end just to make sure it doesn't unravel on me. Turn me hook upside down. And then that crystal flash that I salvaged from the tail, I'm just going to take a bunch of that and I'm going to measure just past the point of the hook underneath where the thread is hanging, and I'm going to tie that stuff in and wrap forward on that a little bit and trim the ends, lift up and trim the ends. Pinch that down. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the beard as I did with the tail. I'm going to come in behind it and make at least 1 or 2 wraps in behind to stand that crystal flash up away from the hook shank. Turn my fly back up, right side again. Now the wing. I'm going to pull up I have two little patches of polar bear, and this one's probably about the right length. I'm going to pick one that I can pick a bit of polar bear that I can see. It's going to be about the right length from the fur bottom out. And I'm going to come in with my scissors and take a small batch of polar bear and cut it off right at the hide so that it maximizes the length. And I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to hold it by the tips, and I'm going to pull all this loose fuzz out of the bottom. And you'll see that's a fairly sparse wing. It's not going to be very, very thick. Now I'm going to take my polar bear and put it in my hair stacker and pound it a few times to get the tips to even up a bit, which they do nicely. See, they're nicely evened up. Then I'm going to measure the polar bear so that it's the same length as where the tail is. I'm going to hold that in my left hand, and I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut it so that I leave a little more than 1/8 of an inch sticking out from where my fingertips are. I'm going to bring the thread back so an eye width behind. I'm going to lay this down so that the end of the polar bear is right at the eye of the hook. I'm going to wrap over that and cinch it right down right to the eye. And I'm going to build a little bit of a pink head here. And once again, the same thing in behind with the thread, and in front, and in behind with the thread, and in front. And that causes that polar bear wing to stand up a little bit. So you see it's really not getting a good look here. So let me see if it does better without, no, it's going to be better that way. So you can see how it stands up, it fans up to the top. And at this point, I'm going to bring the thread just to the front, and I'm going to tie on my black thread over top of it. And I'm going to tie it down.
You don't whip finish the pink first?
Oh, I'm just doing it, I'm tying it off with the black thread.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to, now that I've got that done, I'm going to trim off the pink thread. And I'm going to wrap the black thread back over top of the pink, all the way back to where the wing is tied in, making the head a little bit black. So we're going to make a little more black later. And when I get that sort of covered, I'm going to take my thread right back to where the wing is. And then I'm going to grab a couple of strands of, only a couple of strands of the crystal flash. And I'm going to even up, more or less even up the end, just a couple of strands. And I'm going to lay them down on top and cinch them down. Cinch them down pretty good. Tie them off in front and trim them. And then trim the other ends just a hair longer than the wing. And now I'm going to finish the head by covering it with black thread. I want a fairly prominent black head on this guy. When I get there, I'm going to take my whip finish . Now at this point, you're typical trick would be to cover that head with Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails, as we were talking. What I'm actually going to use here is some UV cement. Do this so you can see why I use the UV. So I have this Loon UV fly finish that I have in two viscosities. I have a thick and a thin. So I'm using the thin stuff for this. I'm going to put the UV cement on this head in enough to make a significant blob of glue on there. And then I'm going to take my UV, keep turning the fly around so that I don't get a huge blob of cement on there in one spot, and try to get it evened out a bit. And then I'm going to hit it with the UV. And what you'll see, I hope you can see, is how that UV flash glows. It really does make it glow quite. You see how the little flashes of the crystal flash really show up with the UV. So that's why I like the UV as opposed to the regular crystal flash. And that's all set. So that's the first version. And all I'm going to do for the second version to make things shorter is I'm just going to show you how I do the body. So the second version is debarb the hook, set it in the vise, and start again using pink thread. Basically the same drill. I'm going to start at the front, come back about a little less than a third of the way. Again, I'm going to try and crowd the eye a little bit, make that head a little bit smaller this time. And I'm going to cover the thread, the hook with thread all the way back. And again, trying to keep it nice and even. And then I'm going to bring the thread back forward. So this is, again, trying to keep a smooth underbody. I'm going to get my polar crystal flash again. I'm going to pull out another 4 strands. About 4. Gently pull them out. And you can maybe see that better. I'll do it that way. Fold it in half. So I've got a loop at the end. There's an extra. And take that loop and lay it down on the fly. Again, about a gap width behind. Tie it in and wrap that all the way back. Get out of there. And then again, once I get to the back here, I'm going to do the same thing as I did the last time. And I think part of the way to make this fly really stand up is to get that couple of wraps just in behind the crystal flash and pull a little bit forward, wrap in front, and then one more in behind and wrap in front. And that makes that thing stand up, and it gives that flare to the crystal flash at the tail. And then I'm going to take my little piece of edge bright, and I'm going to just snip the end at a bit of an angle. And I'm going to tie that in point down on the near side of the hook. Near side of the hook. There you go. And then I'm going to bring my thread forward. Back to, again, eye width behind the eye. And then I'm going to start wrapping this stuff, pulling on it a little bit to stretch it as I wrap. And I'm going to wrap this stuff so that it has very slight overlap, so that you can see there's a little bit of a ridge that happens where I've overlapped the laser wrap. And that gives a rib and a glowing rib to the body of the fly. And then when I get to the very front here, again, just an eye width behind the eye of the hook. A couple of wraps in behind and a couple in front. And again, I'm going to pull this up to stretch it when I go to cut. Bingo, there we go. And then I'm going to wrap that down. Same drill with the crystal flash beard. I think I discarded all the little bits from the last one. So we'll have to pull a couple more out of the package. Where'd it go? Package.
You know, with this stuff, if you put a bit of silver tinsel as an underbody, that thing is like a flashing neon light.
Yeah.
So if you don't want too much flash, you skip that like you're doing here. But if you want to dial it up, that's one way to do it.
Yeah. So again, with this crystal flash, I'm going to make this loop. I'm going to put him right there, tie him down. Wrap in front. I'm going to trim this off. And I'm going to save that because I'll need a couple of strands for the wing. And again, a couple of wraps right in behind. Make it stand out. And then I can measure that right up to the point of the hook and trim it so it sticks out. Come over, and this time I'm going to find a little longer polar bear. And once again, this is going to be fairly sparse, not a whole pile of polar bear. Take it off. And I'm going to hold by the tips, pull the fuzz out. Now in this case, this was some polar bear with some long strands. So I'm just going to pull these really long strands out and even them up with the tips of the others a little bit. Replace them. I'm going to stack the polar bear and measure him again back to the even up with the tail and grab it with my fingers right where the thread is hanging and just cut off all the stuff at the front about 1/8 of an inch shy of where my fingers are. And put that down on the hook right at the back of the eye and take the thread over the top. Pin it down, thread back in behind the wing. And once again in front. Now this time, because the head's a little shorter, I'm going to whip finish that pink thread. But before I cut it off, I'm going to start the black. And I'm going to wrap over top of that pink just to make sure it's completely tied off. And then pull all this stuff back and wrap that black thread head back a bit. Clean it up. And then I'm going to take my couple of strands of crystal flash that I've saved from the first go. I'm going to tie them in right on top of that wing to extend a little past it. And I want some more. Tie those little guys down. Up in front. Turn them off. And make sure everything's lined up. Do a black head, make sure everything is covered up. And make sure the eye is clear. And whip finish. And then once again, a little bit of UV glue on it. That was a little too much. Take that off with my bodkin. And then get my, wherever I put my flash, I'm going to ding that with the UV light. And again, you can probably see how that makes those little bits of crystal flash sparkle to beat heck. And there you are. So that's the two versions of Pearl Kathy's coat.
Dave,
There we go. Yeah.
the UV light only works in salt water, right?
Apparently, yes. This is a fly for pink salmon.
Okay. Now,
Oh,
if
it's
I
a
was
saltwater.
fishing out in the Campbell River, would I use UV or would I just?
I don't think it matters a whole lot. If this is fished fairly close to the surface, I think the UV is going to penetrate the first 1.5 feet of water anyway, so you will get some UV.
Okay.
Where it goes deep, you won't. But in salt water, in fresh water, I should say. But in salt water, if you're fishing from the beach, and that's what this, I think, is more than anything. This would be a beach fly for coho and pinks. So there you go.
Well, thank you.
All right, now I'm gonna stop highlighting me and spotlight, and I'm gonna go to spotlight Florin. And where are we here? How do I do this? There you go. Come on, how can't I spotlight you?
You don't have to spotlight me, I guess.
Oh yeah, right. You have a yeah.
I'm gonna share. I'm sharing the screen, so you don't have to spotlight me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll take the spotlight
so
off.
actually, I'd rather not be spotlighted.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take the remove spotlight. There you go. Now I just have to run because I have to get my daughter away with the bicycles. I'll be back in a few minutes, but Florin, you're on.
Okay, this will be quick. So here's one big size 10 dry fly with the biot body. Specifically, the abdomen is a wrapped body, and you can see the ridges there. That's one way of doing it. And the other one is a smaller one. This is a size 12 rusty spinner. And again, the abdomen is a wrap biot, and this time it's the smooth way. Okay, so this is what mainly this technique is used for. Now, what's important here, and that's why I, I posted that little PDF, is that it's important you distinguish between left wing biots and right wing biots. Okay, and this is not about their political preferences. This is about what side of the bird they come from. So here's a goose feather. This is standard issue Canada goose, found in the city park. And this is a primary flight feather from the left wing of the bird. Okay. Now, if you take a biot out of, and the biots we're interested in are this part, which is on the leading edge of the feather. Okay, you can see here there's a little gap where I already pulled out some. So I'm going to pull out another biot from here to show you. Okay. And put it actually in the vise. So here you should be able to see some of the key ingredients. So this is what the biot looks like if you take a closer look. It's got a, let's call it a nice side, which is the same as on Hackle. It's a size that's a little more colored, and it's curved. Okay, we're going to call that the outside or the good side of the biot. And then the other thing you're going to see here, there's this thing which is usually called a notch, right, on this side of the biot. And what that notch is going to help you is to work out which side the fuzzy part of the biot is. And that's kind of the important thing. I don't know if this is visible in this image here, but you can see here that the side that is opposite the notch has some fuzz on it. And the other side, which actually has this dark edge, is in fact smooth and thinner than the other side. Okay, so this thing is actually shaped like a miniature airplane wing, with the leading edge having fuzz and the trailing edge being nice and smooth. And you can think of it that way. Okay, so now the thing about working out the orientation is going to help you get the desired effect while at the same time building a smooth tapered body. So to get a tapered body, of course, you're going to have to tie this biot in by the tip, right? So you wrap from thin towards thick. So I'm going to start with this is a standard dry fly hook in a size 12. Put that in the vise, and then go searching for my other glasses. They're there. Okay. And now I'm going to take the biot, and I'm going to mount it, whoops, notch down on my side of the hook. So this way I achieve two things. I have the pretty side facing the outside, the fuzzy side is on top, and the smooth side with the notch is on the bottom. Okay, so you should be able to see that over here. Okay, so I'm going to attach the biot at this point. And generally longer biots make for an easier life. Okay, so this is basically what it looks like from my side. And that's why I gave you that PDF, so you can actually see what it would look like when you're tying these things in. For the next step, you want hackle pliers. And you want to grab the biot not at an angle, but straight along its length, right? So you want the hackle pliers in line with the biot. Okay, and then what happens is the magic is when you wrap this. So this is overlapping wraps. So you wrap, and you can see how the leading edge as you're wrapping is the fuzzy edge. So you get that little raised ridge. And then you go and you cover that up with the smooth edge. And then you go, the next wrap covers up again, and you keep going. And what you achieve by doing this is a nice, smooth body that also shows nice segmentation. Okay. Take your time with this because it's, you know, not going to make it any faster if your wraps are uneven or the overlap's not good. Just take it nice and slow and you get a nice body. Okay. And then when you reach this point, just make sure you cover here where you finish off. Give it a whip finish. And you're done. Okay. So normally for a dry fly, you will have tied your tails in beforehand. And this is the point where you start putting in the wing, the hackle, etc. Okay. And this is the smooth version. Okay. Now I'm going to go and show you the ridged version. So for that, I'm going to need a biot from the other side of the bird. Now this particular goose, I think, wasn't quite obliging in leaving me both sides. So, and by the way, no birds are harmed in this process. The geese, at some point mid-summer, they molt. They actually drop their flight feathers, then they go into hiding for a little bit, and then while they grow new feathers. So it's not, nobody gets hurt in this business, other than you if you get too close to a goose. What I normally do is I get my biots out of their packets from the store, and then I go and sort them into left wing biots and right wing biots. And a bit of practice is going to show you very quickly. It helps if you have a proper full feather to look for distinguishing characteristics. At some point, you get very good at sorting these biots. Okay, so I'm going to grab something of whatever color. So let's see here. What do I have? I have yellow. I have olive. Let's do an olive one. So I'm going to get a biot, and again, you want to match the size of the biot a little bit to the size of the hook. So the bigger the hook, the bigger the biot, of course. So I'm going to grab a larger biot here from the midsection of this strip. Okay. And keeping them like this separate makes life a lot easier and faster fly tying. Okay, so get the biot. And now notice that if I hold the biot by the tip and notch down, it's going to be showing the pretty side on the opposite side of the hook, which is what you're seeing. If I mount it pretty side facing up on my side, this thing is going to go notch up. Okay, and this is actually the way I want it. So I'm going to build a quick thread base here. And then take the biot and attach it. Then again, take the same hackle pliers and grab by the tip and start wrapping the same way as I did last time. Now the difference is going to be that the edge that's leading in the wrap is going to be the smooth edge. Okay, so you can see now, as I finish the wrap, a little fuzzy ridge shows up at each turn. Okay, so keep wrapping, and you get this more pronounced segmented body. When you reach the end, same thing, secure with a thread properly. You want this secured very, very well before you cut, because what happens here is you're running the risk of things unraveling on you, and you definitely don't want that. Okay. And here I'm just going to whip finish because I'm not going to finish off the fly. Okay, so this is the ridged variety. Now, if you want to do a smooth body with a right wing biot, you can of course do that. You have to attach the biot then on the far side and counter wrap. So wrap in the opposite direction, and then you get the same effect as with the previous one. The only downside to doing that is, and you can actually see a little bit here, that when you attach at the end, and when I do a real dry fly here, this is not going to be an issue, because this is where the thorax of the fly is, and all this, any unevenness at the very, very end is going to be fully covered up, so it's not a problem. But what happens when you counter wrap, and then you go with the thread to secure that at the end, the thread tension is going to pull in the opposite direction of your wrapping of the biot, and that might loosen the biot and make things ugly. So it's easiest if you sort your biots left side, right side, and then tie with them accordingly. And that's some of the mysteries of tying with biots. Any questions?
Good stuff.
Okay, well, I guess Dave, you know, we spoke earlier about soccer and stuff, and I told Dave that back in Romania when I was listening to soccer on the radio, there are two Daves on the field. One is Dave 1 and the other one is Dave 2. So Dave 1 passes the ball to Dave 2. In this case, Dave 1 passes the ball to Florin, and Florin turns around and passes it to Dave 2. Now, Dave 2, you're on.
Okay, I don't have a share stream on my iPad, but anyways, this is the fly I'm going to be tying, and has a bead up front, a heavy bead, 7/16, I believe. Yeah, 7/32. Oops. It's a tungsten bead. And I'll give you a little history on the fly first. I went out to Prospect Lake and everybody told me they were catching fish on black leeches. So I said, well, I'll go out and see what I can get. I had some dark leeches, but I didn't have any completely black leeches. And when I was putting my boat in, there was a chap gearing up to go bass fishing, but he was the president of the Cloverdale Club. And he told me that, oh, he says, if you're fishing trout, all you need is a red tail. So I looked in my box and I didn't really have much with a red tail. So I fished that day and I caught a couple, but not very much. I caught them on pumpkin heads. So that night I went home and I tied up this particular fly based on the knowledge that I obtained. And one of the things that I'll tell you is quite different in the way I tied it is the head is inverted to what you would normally have so that there's more friction. Now, I fish out of a pontoon boat and my ability to control the speed is limited. you can turn down the motor, but still there's no friction to speak of on a pontoon boat. So you're motoring along at a good clip. You'd like to be motoring at 1.5. If I have any wind, I can do that, but not if it's dead calm. So I look for a little bit of friction and a heavy head to drop the fly down. I also put a hackle on to cause more friction. And the body of the fly itself, I want it as rough as possible. So it causes friction, and the tail is just a tail. But I use a bicolored tail to make a consistency pattern throughout the fly. You have like red, black, red, black. So anyways, but inverting the tons and bead does cause it to want to push down. And anyways, it's been quite successful. So we'll tie it up. Oh, before I start, I also have a smaller version, and it uses a couple different colored materials. Here I played with it, and I used the brown hackle, and it's a little different body, and the tail's the same. So on that fly, I use this particular dubbing. And of course, the rest of the material will be the same, except for that's a smaller hook for a smaller fly. Anyways, as Dave says, if you're going to debar a hook, the time to do it is when you put it in the vise, especially if you're using the stainless steel hooks. So we'll invert that hook, bead. And I'm using a wine-colored thread. It goes well with the particular pattern color that I'm using. We'll just put some thread on the hook, get us started. I like to tie off that little tag, cut it off. Okay.
What size is the hook, Dave?
Well, here again, one of the things I learned is the fish were short biting. So I went down in my inventory and I found this particular one. I was using 4s, but I actually found this is a 5, a Mustang size 6 hook, and it's a 5XL. So it's a fairly large hook. And again, the reason I'm using a large hook is A, they were hitting short, and B, I'm motoring a little faster than I want to be most of the time if it's still, if it's a quiet day on the lake. So we'll just use, this is Marabou, and it comes, there's all different qualities. And this is not a bad batch here. But this particular one is from an older batch, and the quality is so-so. Anyways, you pluck a hair out. In order to find out what you're going to tie, I try to, trying to get in here, try to pull it back and work my way down so that I can see exactly, so I can see exactly what I'm going to put on the hook. So I don't want a very long tail because I'm going to use the body of the hook as part of the tail, because that's one of the reasons I used a long hook. So I'm going to cut off the excess. And because it's an overlapping tail, you'll notice that will be built up. The next thing is I'll do the same thing with black. Again, trying to know exactly what I'm going to put on there. Now, when you're putting that on, don't worry about whether you have the amount of black or red. If you have too little red, add some to it. It's a great product to work with. It doesn't, it's not finite. You can add things to it. So a little practice and you get it looking pretty good.
Dave, could you maybe just move the vise towards your left side?
This side?
Yeah, yeah. So we have the fly more, maybe more in the center.
Okay, very good. Any other comments on that? Again, do this so that you really get a good idea what you're putting on the hook. And then you lay that over top, and you sort of, each time you do that, you're working this way on the hook. So you're using part of the hook as the tail. So those short strikers are thinking the tail's this long when it's really only that long. So that's the tail portion, and you can see it's a good mixture of red and black. Now, for the base of the dubbing material, I ran out, but anyways, I went down to Robinson's and they had this for people that don't like to dub. And this, it's all wrapped up for you, but for the purposes of this exercise, I actually made some dubbing. It's the same material. And I like it because it's really jagged. You know, a lot of crooks and curves to it. So when I dub it on, it's going to make a real massive body fly with a lot of resistance, which I'm looking to achieve.
So what is this crinkly stuff officially called?
It's polar black ice dubbing.
Oh, ice dubbing. Okay.
Yeah, I've ordered some in at Robinson's in case somebody wants to buy some. So if you went down, talk to Matt, or I don't have the package, but Florin, when I get the package back, I'll send you a picture of it. So I forgot to mention, for people that are not comfortable dubbing and you feel that you want to protect the dubbing, there's this ultra thread. Oops, there we are. You can use to put in to hold your dubbing in place. But where I want a really fluffy, crude looking body, I won't be using that. But if I was using this in salt water, I definitely would be, in fishing for salmon, I definitely would be using a wire to hold it in place. Because if you especially like pinks, their teeth tend to haul on the dubbing, and you want your fly to last a little longer. Plus you're using a stainless steel hook. This fly will cease when the hook bends. When I caught so many fish that it will, or caught a bigger fish and it bends. I actually had bent quite a few hooks this year. They're not the strongest hooks, but you know, sometimes you got your rod in a rod holder and you're not, you're reaching and grab it as quickly as you can. So basically you have your tail, your body, which was that ice dubbing. Also, this hair ice dub is good. It's a little different color than the complete black. I had some leftover strands of crystal flash from a previous fly, so I'm going to reuse those since they were used all the way. So I'm just going to tie that in at the top. You can either put this in at the tail or at the top. I don't want it to go past the tail though. Now, I have some old hackles. They're pretty, yeah, probably 20 plus years. So I wanted to use them up. So for the purpose of this fly, I said, well, it's a wet fly. I don't really care what the hackle looks like. So I'm going to turn it so that I'll get the maximum resistance off of the fly. So
It's almost what you call a schlappen hackle.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too is that when you make a fly, you don't want a really expensive fly to tie because, you know, It's not that fun when it gets really expensive. So what I look to is in the hackle to get at least 5 turns on the hackle, and 6. So as I said, you can put this in the tail, or you can put it up there. I find up there it gives a little kind of different feel to the fly. So basically there's your fly. You can put some whip finish on it and some cement, hard as nails. But for those who also have trouble tying a head without a bead really can help you, because the bead will always save the hook, the eye of the hook, from being covered. So if you put, if you have trouble just making a head, use a bead, and it will give you that ease of access to the eye. So basically that's the particular fly. And as I said, this is using the other dubbing, and it's a smaller version. It's about half the size, and it works well too. But when I'm moving really fast, I find the bigger fly works better. So that's kind of the history of what happened there.
So Dave, the option, like I said earlier in the meeting, that I'm doing this balanced leech, which is similar colors. It's a red and black, and the dubbing for this is polar bear, or simulated seal. It's artificial seal. And one of the things I noticed with it, I was talking earlier, is that what Phil says, to make this nice skinny body. Now this is to be fished under a strike indicator, so you don't want resistance. You want it to kind of sit there. And you have to dump it in warm water in order to shape it, because the warm water makes the synthetic material shape better. So you dump this in water. Now you got to see this. This is just amazing. Look at what happens to that little puppy when it gets wet. It loses a bit of its shape, but it has a huge amount of action to it. The body really pulses. And I think that's partly why these flies are so effective, is that when they get wet, that whether it's synthetic seal or whether it's marabou or that crystal chenille, is that when they go through the water, that body pulses. It doesn't just streamline down and become a skinny little thing like that. And
Yeah,
I think that's why they work so well, is they look alive. They really have a living look to them.
And Dave,
Oh.
by the way, I like your half hitch technique.
Whip finish. I've not seen that technique before. That's cool.
And I just tried it. It's brilliantly beautiful and easy.
I'm going to tell you something. I learned to tie flies. My father gave me 2 flies to fish with. And we fished in New Brunswick, was where I learned to fish. And often you'd have a bank or a great big cliff behind you, granite. It would go straight up, and you're fishing and your fly would go up kind of sideways, off to one way, and then cast the opposite way. It'd take you about a minute to break the hook off on 2 flies.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I had to learn to tie my own flies, and they often had picnic tables along in New Brunswick. They were very courteous in that when you fished a pool, you lined up, or you sat and ate your lunch while the other guy fished through the pool. And one guy would fish and you give him about 20 feet and another 20 feet. So a pool was not really beat to death like it is out here. Like you could have 30 people in a pool.
Yeah, that's etiquette, on-stream etiquette. It's like the same way in New Zealand. If you're fishing the Tongariro, if you're going to fish the pool, you come up to the pool and you start at the bottom, and you work your way up. So you make a few casts and then you take a couple of steps upstream. And the guy at the top of the pool, when he hits the top of the pool, or if he catches a fish, he goes out, walks down to the bottom and starts at the bottom again.
Yeah.
So you have people cycling through the best water.
Yeah,
It's
well,
too-
basically,
have here.
people waited, and if you hooked the fish, everybody backed out of the pool. And
Yep.
then returned back to where you were. But what happened is I'd be sitting on the picnic table, and a vise then might have been a clothespin or a couple piece of steel that somebody had made a vise on. But then herders came along, and I ordered a vise out of herders, and you clamped it. It was made to clamp to a picnic table. So I would go out with the fishing net and scrub around the bottom of the river and see what insects there were, and then I come back and tie them. And your tools were, I don't have the original, but these are 30-year-old Weiss scissors. And but they were stainless steel scissors. And that was about all you had for tools. And so whip finish, you looked in the book and you did the best you could. And then a guy came by one day and said, you know, he says, this might be better. And he did a quadruple whip finish by hand on the thing, and it did. So usually I tie 3 knots at any time I tie a knot. That's what he told me to do. So I still do that to this day.
Just demo it again, Dave.
What? Oh, you want to
Show
go?
us again.
Yeah. But none of my flies, I've always given my flies away. I've never really, well, I did sell a couple because people wanted to buy them. But so basically you just whip it around. And just haul tight, and never comes out.
Slow down.
Oh, slow down. Yeah, I am too. So basically you go round once, round twice, round 3, round 4, and then close it in. 1, 2, 3, 4, close it in, and then pull it tight.
So that's like a continuous half hitch with 4 wraps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very similar to a
Yeah.
whip finish. But very quick, doesn't need a tool.
Well, as I said, the only tools I had, it was really a step up when I got a vise. But you got to admit that I was probably only 5 or 6 years. I think I was 6 when I got the vise.
There you
So,
go.
Dave,
Yeah, what's nice about
You
it
can-
is when you do when you do just 1 half hitch with 1 or 2 turns, use just 1 fingers, it allows you to place that knot
Yeah.
with extreme precision. And in fact, this is much better than using a half hitch tool, which you
Yeah.
have to slip over the hook, and is not going to let you put, like you can do this at the tail of the fly.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely brilliant. So thank you for that.
my ignorance here, Dave. When you're doing those loops, it was kind of hard to see. Are you actually going around the hook 4 times?
No.
Yeah. Well, here, watch. I'll do it one more time.
But just do it slow.
Okay. I'm doing it in the air. 3, 4, and then I wrap it around the hook.
So you're doing 4 wraps around your pair of fingers of the thread coming off the
I'm
spool,
used
and then you're putting
to wrap
one,
the finger.
yeah, the thread's coming
And
off
around.
the spool, and you're putting it down on the hook. Cool. That's cool.
That's awesome.
I'm a minimalist when it comes to tools, although Dave has really enlightened me on some tools.
There are some tools that are really worth.
Here's the bobbin, right? I never had a bobbin, but then I bought one, and the ones I probably still, oh, here they are. But they didn't, these are the Chinese ones that don't have the ceramic in the center. And when you put too much weight on them, they cut your thread. So you learn that. And when you did your dubbing, we had a little block of beeswax, and you just went up and down your thread, and you got your dubbing. But your dubbing, if you didn't harvest the bird or the rabbit or whatever, It was hard though. It wasn't as soft pliable
this-
as what you get. in
Yeah,
tubes.
this stuff is pretty tacky that I've got. It's pretty
Yeah.
soft. But I had the
Yeah,
same thing. The one that I still have is in a little paper cup that you dispense ketchup in, that I got back in 1968, I think, from the Hook and
Well, they
Hackle in
came in a
Calgary.
tube of sugar. They were wrapped in wax paper.
Well, this stuff was
And-
a mixture of beeswax and candle wax, and it was poured in
Yeah.
this little cup. And I still got it. It lasts forever.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the history of fly tying, I grew up in the Atlantic Canada and weighted flies were illegal. So there was no lead and there's no beads. So when I came out here, everybody uses beads and lead and all kinds of stuff. Having said that, I went in and looked at the history of beads. It wasn't until 1972 when the first bead was used. So, I mean, beads haven't been around all that long. And so, but they are a great tool for, especially for trout fishing in lakes. Anyways, I'm not sure what you want to do next week, but I have a couple little sledge
Well,
flies.
I got a couple ideas for next week. You guys probably missed it, but Colin had sent me an email, and I'll see if I can share the content here. Screen.
What were you going to say, Dave, before the you had some sedges while
Yeah, I tie a little different than, I'm not formally trained, so I'm kind of the bush tire. But I've used this to great success out here. This is a good river fly, but I found out it's an excellent lake fly. And when I go out and troll, I have this on one and this on the other.
so
And
that's
I've
it's a wet fly, it's not a dry fly, is it?
It's a wet fly, yeah.
Because I
It's
see a bead there.
Yeah. It's a sledge.
Oh, yeah.
Well, or to me, it looks more like a stone fly. And when I originally tied it, I didn't have any book. And I used, here's the original. Here's one of the original ones, but it just had an orange head and kind of a, anyways, that one's a little dolled up, but let me find one here. Yeah, the beads are something that's, I never used to work with. Here's one with a brown head. But basically, you got a body that's mohair, little tail on the fluorescent tail on the back. This one happens to be calf tail and a little hackle up front. But that's a really decent fly out here, I found.
I'm
That
gonna-
would be interesting to
I'm gonna
see,
share
because
some
that
con-
seems to be like a bit of a generic pattern that can be varied in colors.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to kind of pass along is that probably if I tie a fly, you won't see it in a book because I call all these flies generic flies. And everybody should have a pattern that they feel comfortable fishing with. And you read in the books, if you feel good about your fly, you'll probably catch fish.
So I'm,
So,
I'm going to share content here, I think, if I can get it to work. Let's see, start broadcast. See if this is going to work.
If not, I can go into my email and share the stuff you sent me
I don't
yesterday.
know what's doing here. Zoom.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know why I'm not getting this is ridiculous. Stop. Go to application. Nope, that's not working. I don't know why.
I can do it for you, Dave, if you just give me a second.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing this. Let me try again.
So I'm looking at that sedge pattern, and I use one that can be floating or just under the surface, and it's very similar to the one that you showed me, Dave.
yeah, I just tied the fly up and I went into Robinson's and asked him what it was. And he said it was a sledge. So I looked it up and I looked at it and it is similar. It also is similar to a stone fly.
There you go. I can show you now. So there's this is the email from Dave.
Maybe. I don't understand what happened there.
So he's got some pretty cool names, right? The near enough. This is one I had heard about.